You should challenge whatever tools that you're reviewing that they do things end to end. You don't need another dashboard, right? You need a system that does the work. That's when ChatGPT launched, kind of came running out like a kid in a candy shop, not just a co-pilot, but something that executes the close. Yeah, we're able to do the data wrangling, data reconciliation, tag it appropriately, write that into your GL, match it to the bank transaction at the end of the day. So if like 15 to 40 hours of work cuts down to 30 minutes.
Welcome to Tech Finance. I'm your host, Sasha Orloff, repeat founder and current CEO of Puzzle, and self-professed finance nerd. On this show, we dive into the pulse of B2B fintech, from newly funded startups transforming the office of the CFO to major industry shifts, deals, and partnerships that are reshaping how we think about finance. You'll hear the most important developments, essential analysis, and of course, AI innovations. This show is brought to you by Puzzle and the Turpentine Podcast Network. Let's dive in. All right, everybody, welcome again to season 2, where we are focused on something near and dear to my heart, improving accounting with software and AI. So actually, we have a pretty exciting guest today because Alex is one of the OG pioneers of accounting and AI, and he started a company called Truewind. And I actually think you guys might be the very first startup that I know of, at least, that was leaning directly into AI in the accounting space. So it's a fascinating story, and I'm excited to share with you. So Alex, welcome to the show.
Sasha, thanks for the invite. Really excited to be here. Although it's funny for you to call me the OG because I look at you as the one that we've been following. So we'll leave it at that. But thanks for having me here, man.
All right. Well, for those of you that are listening to the show that are just hearing about maybe Truewind for the first time, Alex, can you give us a pitch? What are you building and who's it for?
Yeah, we're building AI for accountants. We're building AI workflows and AI agents to help accountants close their books faster and get more back in their day. We're working largely with accounting firms, although with internal accounting teams as well. Our thesis is if this tool is for accountants, whether you're an accountant at your own shop, at a larger firm, or in an in-house corporate team, our tool helps you get your books closed faster. So that's what we're building it for.
I think you were one of the first, at least something the first I remember that really kind of publicly said we're going to lean into AI and accounting before it was obviously such a cool topic for the rest of us. Tell us a little bit about the backstory of how Truewind started and how you got to where you are today.
Maybe there's a little bit of luck and timing in this that I couldn't have predicted. The Q3, Q4 of 2022, I was dabbling, getting ready, trying to figure out my next thing. And I was working around FP&A, kind of go deeper down in the stack into all things bookkeeping and accounting. And November of 2022, I incorporated the company. We had our first customers. We got into YC. And that same month, my GPT launched. Now, before ChatGPT launched, I was hearing whispers about GPT-2, GPT 2.5, and then this GPT-3 that was going to be coming out. And I remember, I don't know what day it was when ChatGPT launched, but I remember I was at home. My then fiance, now wife, was hanging out in the living room. I was in the office, and I kind of came running out like a kid in a candy shop, just so excited with this new technology that was released because it clicked. It clicked of how you can apply this into finance and accounting. So I had already started True and we are going to build a accounting solution, but there was still a bit of like, how much should I lean into this whole AI thing? And the funny story, I don't tell too often, but I'll tell here. A buddy of mine said, try Truewind.com or Truewind.ai. Which one do you think is going to raise more money? Yeah, we're going to go with Truewind.ai. But it really made sense. Like that, that story and joke aside, it made sense of how to apply AI in accounting. So here we are now.
Did you join YC before ChatGPT launched?
Well, Truewind, it was winter 23 and ChatGPT launched November of 22. So November that month, a lot of things happened. We got accepted into YC and incorporated the company, and ChatGPT came out all at the same time.
What was the original pitch?
The AI angle, right, was not part of my YC story. It was more around building accounting automation using the technologies we're familiar with. So more call it maybe RPA at the time.
Yeah.
Remember one of the YC partners or one of the interviewers on the call was like, I'm not really getting it. But fortunately, one of the other partners really got it. So we got it.
So this is not your first company. What was the thing that like made you decide you wanted to start another company?
I think I'm the kind of guy that can find many topics interesting which is a good and a bad thing. A good thing because I'm motivated just by being able to work on hard problems with great people. You can find that in a lot of different places. Bad thing, maybe I'm not as driven by just the subject that we're in, but I have spent enough time in the general CFO category now, 5 years, that I think I am driven by this cause. When I started my previous company, Blue Light, it was kind of coming off of my VC days. I was a junior investor, so most of the time was on the deal team, but they would occasionally loan me out to the portfolio companies to do the reporting on all that. And so I remember doing the ARR, MRR reporting, making sure the books were tied up and thinking there's got to be a better way to do this. So Blue Light was more a FP&A type solution, more around reporting and analytics. And, had a good time, did a couple things right, did more than 100 things wrong. And I think one of the biggest challenges is around, as you know, with most FP&A companies, getting quality access to the GL data is just so painful. And so when I left Blue Light, I thought, I want to stay in the CFO space, but let's get a little closer to ground zero, get a little closer to, the source of truth and accounting data. That is a GL. We're not building a GL. We leave that hard problem to guys like you, but we're much close to it. We're able to work with that kind of source truth of the data.
Why, I think the generic answer of why now that we hear often is like, oh, AI right now. What specifically is it that you think that this unlocks that makes this such an exciting category right now for the venture community?
From a technology standpoint, if we thought accounting could have been automated through a set of rules, that would have been done back in the early 2000s. We had JavaScript back in what, 95 or 97. So you had your rules-based software, the basis of it already. And as we well know, years later, it's far from automated. And it's because you can buy, depending on the type of business, if you buy from the same place, it can be classified differently. Even the same business, I can buy a $500 hotel room from the Hyatt, it's classified one way, but I can buy a meal from the Hyatt, it's classified another way. I can buy a water bottle or a gift card from the gift shop, it's classified another way. But we're limited by kind of the foundation of the banking industry. We are limited in this ACH spec where you only have a few characters for the company name and you have a few characters for description, which at the time might have been sufficient. But as the economy boomed and there are far more transactions happening, we're very limited in that information we're capturing. It doesn't tell you why that transaction was being made, for what period of time, for what purpose. And so you're missing out on all the things that accountants really need. That information that accountants need is the context of the purchase. That is ultimately what drives the decision of what is a debit or a credit. And that's where LLMs function so well. And so from a technology standpoint, that's been fantastic. But as you also well know, from a market standpoint, I don't think there's ever been a time now that accountants have been so receptive to new technology. We were just at scaling new heights. Everything was about technology and AI. And it was this warm reception. I think, cautious optimism is also another way to think about it, but at least they're showing up and they want to try things out. They're embracing it and trying to figure out ways to work it into their workflow. So that market timing feels very advantageous for us.
I want to go just a bit off script here because I know we've talked about this before, but I think you've been going to these accounting conferences for a couple of years now. Tell us a little bit about how the tone or the enthusiasm or the adoption has shifted from when you started to just recently.
Well, we only have a year underneath our belt, so I can only speak to last June till today. And when we went to Engage, AICP Engage last June, there was already a lot of talk about AI. We hosted a session and I did a quick, show of hands. Who here has used ChatGPT? Who here has played with AI? And I would say like a good 50, 60, maybe 7% hands went up as weekly active users or have used it before. In the most recent months, when I asked the same question, it was closer to 90 plus percent. Most hands went up that we play with it, we've used it. But then when you ask about who are the daily active users, who's figured out how to embed this into the workflow, that is still closer to like 20 to 30% of hands. Like everyone kind of sees the power of it, what it can do, but they haven't quite figured out how do I work this into my practice so I can unlock real value. And maybe this is why we talk about like we're early innings in AI. I imagine the early days of computers, people thought, all right, I'm going to buy a computer and magically things change overnight. That doesn't happen, right? I would love for it to happen, but it doesn't happen. But still, It's a bit of a journey, but the firms that we started working with last year, they're really seeing it. More and more our clients are getting on board, and I think it's still years ahead for this to grow.
So we're seeing sort of a greater adoption. And what do you view as like the future of how finance or accounting teams operate that will look different than what's happening today?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I was thinking about a lot about this question because on one hand, my answer was going to be, I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to leave it a little bit to how the customer reacts, the decisions they choose to make to ultimately see how it plays out. I think at a very and simple level answer would be if you have less junior accountants, less junior analysts doing the basic data entry work, which let's be real, like how much are you really learning from doing that job? Probably not a whole lot. So how does that change? I think they will just have to learn the job in other ways. I'm more interested in thinking about our historically accountants were using quill, ink, parchment. And so you write something, if you make a mistake, you have to cross it out. And eventually we figured out pencils and erasers, we can at least erase them, but you're still writing. Then that once we had the typewriter, we started typing. So the modality of how accountants got information down from writing down to typing, that was an innovation. And then we went typewriters to computers, but you're still typing. In this era of AI and LLMs, one thing we're thinking about is could we change the way accountants work rather than clicking, copying cells, deleting cells? What if they are just trying to communicate their understanding of business in their head into words and then AI is able to execute those different tasks? Like that's a vision that we have. Although, I don't know, it's a bit of a hurdle because it is easier to click in Excel than to communicate what exactly you needed to do. I was a bit of a non answer, Sasha, but I'll leave it there.
No, not at all. Well, you have a vision, you have this vision of the future, and you're building product that gets there. Tell us about your approach and what you're seeing with your customers in like how they use Truewind and how that's different than what they're doing today.
Yeah. So one key thing in our approach is what we decided not to build a new general ledger. And this is one that we've discussed over years and we can continue debating on. The reason we chose not to build a GL, I think primarily two. One, very pragmatic. It's very hard. As you want to know, it's exceptionally hard. There are so many edge cases that you need to, provide a sandbox so they can at least cover those edge cases. It takes a lot of time, a lot of money, and that is an enormous endeavor on its own. So that's the first thing. The second thing for us, we thought it's easier for us to convince customers to try us than switching out the GL entirely. Now, from like
Yeah.
a company enterprise value standpoint, I realize we're missing out on a lot, but that was the decision that we chose. So we're gonna build on top of the GL. That does unfortunately mean we're fundamentally limited in certain things we can do, right? We are beholden by how good the QBO or the Sage Intact GL is. So that's one approach that I think is fundamentally different about us. And then the second thing is then when you think about all the things that are not in the GL, the human needs to classify transactions, they need to communicate with the client, they need to create and host those schedules and work papers. Where in that spectrum of work are we going to choose to tackle? And this is the GL over here. I don't want to be too close to the GL because I know you guys have plans to do all of that. So we're thinking the complex accrual schedules, that seems to be a very good place. That's a very important part that accountants spend a lot of time on. Let's choose to tackle those complex schedules. So a combination of those two, I say, is where our approach is different.
Yeah, and there's been obviously massive successes in seeing people take certain parts of the accounting and build a best in class, whether that's, you know, the payroll subledger with like a Gusto or Rippling, or a spend subledger like a Ramp or a Brex, or a billing subledger like a Stripe. And that is really just missing the whole transformation aspect of an ETL if we simplify the accounting that way. There's no, I think, out there best in class sort of solution that can also play across various types of GLs. And a lot of legacy players just haven't been able to really sort of nail that. I sort of call it the bundled set of mediocrity of the past, and there will be best in class people. As we start sort of thinking about automation, how do you find the segment where this really resonates? I think some people in various industries There's the fear of job displacement. We see this over in like maybe some content generation or customer success or marketing, where, depending on the size of the company or the complexity, the one argument is people have more time. And the other argument is like, well, that's kind of doing my job, just not as good. As Truewind continues to be successful, what do you view the future role of accounting to look like between automation and human oversight?
Well, I have an answer from my lens, and I also want to share my answer from perhaps the accountant's lens. From my lens, with every new wave of innovation and technology, I think what it really unlocks is our ability to hold on to more data and the things that we can do with our data. If you want to go back, let's say 100, maybe 100 plus years, when we first created file storage systems that you could just have in your office and you can store everything. All right, there's no reason not to hold on to every damn receipt now. And so, right, that's a version of all this paper that like, all right, it's too much. We're just gonna get rid of it because we don't have a good storage system, but now we do. It did actually add in more work, but it gave us more auditability. It gave us more ability to dive deeper, get insights, etc. So when I think about what this can do for us in accounting, automation accounting is going to unlock more data, is going to allow us to use that data to drive more insights, and this ultimately drives the economy further forward. So I think of it as like wealth creation across the board. From the accountant standpoint, is our jobs going to go away? Perhaps, perhaps not. I don't know. I never really know how to answer some of those questions. I do think like the fundamental bookkeeping jobs, people may be trained, go there, come in as a bookkeeper to get trained a little bit, but be expected to grow out of that more quickly to take on that next level role of reviewing and then advising the client. And working with these accounting firms, the partners are certainly very excited as to how they can use this to grow their business and grow their margins. And one thing that we do ask the partners to work with us on is kind of communicating what Truewind does to their junior staff and showing them as this is a learning opportunity to embrace new technologies because this will be part of the future. Not that it's going to take away your job now, but that rather there's a path for us to continue growing together. That's not a message that we can send. It's a message that we have to rely on the partners, the firm owners, and the people we work closely with to have that message.
Hey, we'll get back to the conversation in a moment after a word from our sponsors. I think you all remember that sound. It's the dial up. Why would startups still be using accounting software from the 1990s? It's like running your company on dial up internet. It's like raising a Series A on a fax machine or pitching investors with a flip phone. You wouldn't build the next unicorn with outdated tech, so why are you still running your numbers on it? Puzzle is leading a new movement, an AI-first ledger that eliminates the grunt work, updates in real time, and actually helps you make informed decisions. No more waiting, no more guessing, just the clarity you need it when speed matters. This isn't just accounting, it's the future of how businesses run. Join the movement today at puzzle.io. All right. One of my favorite tools that I use and we use is Notion. Notion is used by thousands of startups around the world as their connected workspace for everything from engineering specs to new hire onboarding to fundraising. Notion has a special offer for listeners. 6 months of free Notion with unlimited AI, value of over $6,000. So you can access the limitless power of AI right inside of Notion to build and scale your company and team with one tool. Get 6 months free of Notion with unlimited AI, along with custom templates when you apply for notion.com/startups/puzzle. Once again, that's notion.com/startups/puzzle. Go for it. I think you were one of the first sort of people in this space to talk about this like digital staff account. We see these billboards in San Francisco, like your AI BDR, your AI agent. The person come and say, hey, we're your digital staff account. Tell me about how that positioning came about, because it's quite unique.
It was a little bit of um, perhaps a play to avoid the word AI at our headline because we say a digital staff accountant, but then the subline is like AI, 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 AI. But we thought everyone's putting AI in the headline. What if we take it out and what kind of play could we have there? And after an afternoon of riffing, we landed on digital staff accountant. Seems to be something that resonates with a lot of our customers. So they can picture it, right? Take my staff account and digitize them and they can do that body of work. I think the early challenges we had is they imagine it could do too much. I'm like, hold on. Yeah, we can't do 90% of the things you're picturing. But that's how the digital staff accountant came about. Mind you, the subline has like AI 3 times in there.
Right. All right. So speaking of AI, I'm sure you've been messing around and trying a bunch of stuff. What's your personal favorite feature, your AI feature that Truewind's built?
My personal favorite feature is what we call a deposit reconciliation feature. The pain point that the customer faces is whether they use a Shopify or an Airbnb or Stripe, or think of any 100,000 payment systems that exist across America. They send out 100 different invoices. Uh, and after fees, taxes, etc., somehow like one number appears in your bank account. And if you go into the source system and download that data, it's thousands of lines of data, none of which the GL can understand. So how do you go from that raw data set into reconciling with that last number in the bank account? So using AI, we're able to do the data wrangling, data reconciliation, tag it appropriately, write that into your GL, match it to the bank transaction at the end of the day. So that body of like 15 to 40 hours of work cuts down to 30 minutes to 60 minutes work.
Love it. Love it. That's great. Unfortunately, I'm a personal fan of smaller government. There was one rule that was coming in, which was going to require banks to open up API access to everything and have a lot more data coming through in the feeds. And unfortunately, that got nixed in the latest round of government cuts. So that rule looks like it's going to be repealed. That was, I think, probably the only one major government law that I was like really kind of looking forward to is the ability to share all this like rich data that sits inside the banks. As a former person working in one of the largest banks in the world, as somebody who built a lending business, the first lending business based around cash flow underwriting from bank accounts, there's still so much data locked in there that would be really great.
I'm on the same page with you as small government. I love that we have a little touch on politics here. But yeah, I didn't know about the that banking piece. I'll look that up. It's a bummer that I didn't get through.
It was supposed to go live, I think this month, June, July 2025. But anyway, it would have been huge. All sorts of really exciting stuff could have been built on top of that, especially Amex. Amex, if you're listening, come on, just like open up your data. What's going on over here? All right. Over to some exciting news, fundraising. So congrats on a fairly recent round from somebody that, knows a little bit about tax and accounting, Thomson Reuters, obviously YC and others. Tell us a little bit about how the raise came together.
We raised our seed round in 2023, and we met the team at Thomson Reuters shortly after that. And that's when we first started building the relationship. Saw a lot of good partnership angles. So they invested, call it as part of our seed round or seed extension later that year. But they always knew like we want to work closely together. And when Truewind raises the A round, that they wanted to be a more meaningful part of the next round. So 2023 went through, and 2024, half of the year was good. Q3 was when we started to, hit that first inflection point, started to take off a little bit when we hit the road to go fundraise. Spent about 4 weeks fundraising, lined up meetings for the entirety of September. And there was a fund who was really excited by us called Row Capital based in New York, and they were open to co-leading with Thomson Reuters. So that came together very seamlessly, very quickly. It was one of those, they talked about it with each other first, and then later on talked about it with me. I'm like, that's exactly how I kind of pictured it all along. So really glad we can make it work. So yeah, from first meeting to close, very fortunate to get that done in 4 weeks. Then, we want to make sure other folks could continue participating. So we had YC invest in that round as well. Pathlight Ventures, Charlie Ma and Madi from New York, they've been fantastic. So yeah, in short, that's kind of how the round came together.
Nice, nice. What do you think they saw that got them to so excited to invest?
I think it was mostly how closely we stay with the customer. That was when I asked them that question, what was it? That was the first thing they said. We listen very, very closely to the customer, and we let the customer pull us in the direction that makes sense. Now it's a little bit dangerous sometimes because they'll list the customer as when you're dealing with accountants, they go down the month-end checklist, right? We need this, we need this, we need this. And early on, we listened, and that kind of pulled us a little bit in the wrong direction. But over time, as we learn to ask better questions, learn to do discovery better, that's when we start building into the subledger direction. The accrual accounting space is the harder part and the part where they don't have a solution to tackle yet. So I think that's probably the reason why, that's one of the reasons why they wanted to invest in us at the end.
Nice. So 4 weeks is much shorter than the average fundraise. Any advice to the founders out there listening about raising in this environment?
Yeah, I was told that by another founder who's further ahead. He said the average raise is what is it, like 3, 4 months? Is that what it is?
Yeah. Yeah.
4 weeks is great, but it certainly didn't feel that way. It was pretty awful. I think the usual things you read about, stacking a bunch of meetings together at the same time, using that as a mechanism to drive momentum and, progress, those are all true. But what else comes to mind? Here's one, not over optimizing the deal. What do I mean by that? Not Truewind, but previously I was raising a round and there was a fund that wanted to invest in our round. And I got a little like too playful. I started to say, well, what if you invested this amount? Because I want to make room for this person. What about this term and this term? And I started like, I don't know, maybe I felt like I had leverage or something. I got a little too playful with every single deal term. So I started optimizing for the deal terms rather than optimizing for speed. And so what my learning from that was in the entire process, from the first meeting all the way to getting a term sheet and getting it to a close, optimize for speed. Yes, there are terms that need to be renegotiated, but know which ones don't. And when the VC is evaluating you, know which ones to spend more time on because you qualified them well versus some that would never invest in your category because it's not interesting to them. And I think that really helps with optimizing for speed.
Yeah, a lesson I learned quite early on in my bachelor days, going to a bar and trying to optimize which person around instead of just like taking the closed deal. And then by the time you learn that lesson, I found my wife, closed her right away. Actually, that's not true. It took about 3, 4 months to wear down and a couple gin and tonics. And then went in for the kill, closed it. 20 years later, two beautiful kids. Here we are. So applies to multiple lessons in life.
Love it.
All right, you closed your round, you got your momentum, you're hitting the conference circuit, you got your customers. What does success look like for Truewind over the next 12 to 18 months?
A little bit of a cliche answer, but success means solving a painful, recurring workflow problem in a way that's 10x better and having our customers tell their peers about it. We're starting to, like some of our customers are telling other folks about it, but we need to see more of that.
What's one example of that? So for we have a lot, majority are internal finance and ops teams right now. So if we sort of like what's the first problem that you think you guys solve really, really well that you can expand on that you want your listeners to sort of go to Truewind to go check out?
I'll hone in on the earlier one I said on deposit reconciliation. I think the reason why this has resonated so well with our customers because revenue is a bit of an unsolved problem. There's a lot of good expense solutions on the market, whether it's from a payroll or a banking or credit card expense management standpoint, travel management, etc. But when it comes to revenue, there are so many different invoicing and billing type solutions. You can collect money in so many different ways. I mean, you can collect money on Venmo, right? And so many small businesses do. Revenue becomes this massively unsolved problem. And because we've been able to figure out how to give accountants a way to do that, they're
Yeah.
able to go to their clients and say, you have all these invoices going out and you're not sure how like you multiply the number of products that you sell by the dollar amount and then the number that arises differently. We can help you solve that problem in a very efficient way to, we're not going to need to charge your business too much. That continues to be the thing that customers keep coming back to us for. And we think everything else that we build is like ancillary pieces around it to make that product even more sticky.
Yeah, I'm still pissed at Amex, Visa, and MasterCard for not capturing line item details in the credit card transaction feed. Like, come on, these like disconnected things are so annoying just as a consumer, let alone for accounting, which I know is annoying. What's a milestone that you are really excited about, just sort of personally, as this, starting and building on Truewind?
Perhaps two things, one from a product angle and the second from a go-to-market standpoint. From a product angle, we've been spending a lot more time building autonomous agents this month. So not just a co-pilot, but something that executes a close. I would say end to end, but end to end's a very big phrase. So we started dabbling in that first last year. I'm actually curious on your experience working with agents. Last year, we thought, they're okay, but we weren't confident in them enough to deploy them to our top 50, like the top 50 accounting firms we work with. But this year is gone a lot better. We're able to give them an abstract task, an abstract document, and with enough of the right prompting and the context around it, they're able to execute the task very, very well. And so shipping autonomous agent to help tackle parts of the month end close. And the second thing is continuing to work with the top 500 accounting firms and growing across their client base that we're already working with.
Nice. It's we can have a long conversation after this because as soon as we make a claim about how to make agents optimize and works like Sam or Anthropic, we're going to tweet out some new capability that nobody's thought of yet. It's all going to be worth zero. But I do think like it's one of the things that I hope that we can actually potentially solve together over time. Because I think the most reliable way is these autonomous agents going out and finding and doing it. They then need to know how to go execute that with high confidence. And I think that's a piece missing in the GL space that we hopefully can enable as well. And so we build our own internal, like very well documented internal sort of calls, and then the agent looks for the right one to go execute it. So the agent's more of the finder, but it's not actually doing a lot of the deployment and the changes because that sometimes can be unreliable. All right, so closing it out now before I ramble on about stuff that's interesting to probably you and me and nobody else listening here. For finance leaders who are listening and might be sort of burnt out with how they've been doing things in the past, what's your message to them?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd say is I hear you. App fatigue is a very real thing. The number of solutions you have in the market. Secondly, I think the technology industry has done a disservice to the CFO category at large and the tools you deliver to them. With that said, I do think the technology industry did gift the CFO function the greatest piece of technology of all time, Excel. I think Excel is one of the greatest pieces of software ever. I still use it very often. I might be one of the few in Silicon Valley that pay the Microsoft tax just to be able to use Excel as Excel and not Google Sheets. So from that standpoint, I empathize. But what I would tell them, my message to them, you don't need another dashboard, right? You need a system that does the work. I think there's never been a better time to reimagine what your finance function could look like with a set of new tools. I think you should challenge whatever tools that you're reviewing that they do things end to end. And I think that's always been consistent with the finance org. Like whether it's SAP or one of the FP&A tools, that they buy a few tools and they work end to end. I think that mindset shouldn't go away. But I don't think there's been a better time to revisit what that stack looks like for the future.
And when you work with people, do you think of Truewind as come to Truewind and there's a set of tools or agents that you can use? Or do you think of it also as come to me and tell me about some of your problems and let's help build something together?
Oh, a bit of a tricky one. I feel like we're going through this awkward adolescence phase of the startup where like we're not a kid, but we're not adult yet either. So, there's certainly a bit of both. We go in and say there's a set of tools and modules that we have built. And I think a lot of companies like us because we have a range of modules, things that they can stitch together or run their operation off of. But at the same time, sometimes it's from them, sometimes it's from us. Like we want them to guide us in the right direction, right? We know there's still much to still to build. So from that standpoint, we still want to remain like a kid, always listening to our customers. So my cop out answer is both, man. On that one, it's both.
Well, okay, so there's deposit reconciliation, there's prepaid expenses, fixed assets, flex analysis, and it's sort of an AI assistant. But that sounds like just some of the features that you're getting a lot of traction on, but still a lot more ambition to come.
Yeah, 100%. That's right.
Love it. And then the second question for founders who are building in complex, super sexy categories like accounting, what's your advice on how to really win the hearts and minds of your customers?
From a go-to-market standpoint, I'd say in these unsexy categories, trust is the brand. You need to earn it with consistency and results. So tactically, how that worked for us was number one, conferences. We want to meet with accounting firms and they go to conferences to buy software. They go to conferences to shop it, see what's the newest and the latest thing there. And so we went to conferences, and we always wanted to have a meaningful presence and give basically that conference where they meet us is the beginning of the experience. And we want to make sure it is energetic, it's exciting, it's fun. Then the next time you get on a call with us, that journey continues. So that's from a go to market standpoint. I say trust is the brand, and you need to think about it from their first touch point with you. And then the second thing would be finding the pain that's hiding in plain sight and build something boringly reliable that solves it 10x better than anyone else. Yes, we have this big vision of all the things that we want to build, but got to nail down a pain point. And for us, that started with deposit reconciliation and all the other things kind of packaged around it. I was going to say don't chase hype, obsess over utility, which I deeply, deeply do believe in. But then again, we're also leaning very, very heavy into AI. So I don't know how much of a right I have to say that line.
Well, you can't miss the Truewind booth, at least at Scaling New Heights. We were sitting in our little booth in the shadows behind you in the big, bright welcome to Truewind Vegas style, which I loved. So you've been going to some conferences, you're building deep in AI. What is, one thing you believe about the future of finance that you think others don't?
Well, when I think about AI, technology, automation. It always talks about automating jobs away. Ultimately, I don't think it will. I think the job still needs to be done by an accountant, but I think we're going to augment is perhaps one way to think about it, but we're thinking we're going to change the way you do that work. You're still going to need to do your reconciliations. You're still going to need to do the categorizations. You're still going to need to do a lot of these different things, but we're going to fundamentally change how you do it. Again, from the, writing with your hand to typing, what is the next modality or medium that we can introduce to accounting firms for them to execute that body of work? That's what I believe. We're going to change the way you're doing the work. The work is still going to be there. Like ultimately, you still need to deliver that to your clients because you're the ones who the clients trust. You can't look into a robot's eye and say whether or not you believe them. But we can help change the way that's being done in a way so it's more enjoyable and unlocks more value.
Love it. Where can people go to learn more about Truewind?
Check out our website, truewind.ai. Hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter. I reply to just about everything and hope to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, Alex, thanks for coming on the show. It was great.
Sasha, this is fun. Thanks so much for having me.
Cool. Thanks for listening to Tech Finance with Puzzle and Turpentine. If you got value from this episode, please share it with anybody building or funding the future of technology. And please leave us a review wherever you're listening and tell me about what you want to hear more of. If you're looking for accounting software you'll actually love to power your company, check out puzzle.io, the modern accounting platform for the AI era. Tech Finance is part of Turpentine, the awesome podcast network behind Econ 102 with Noah Smith, Turpentine VC, Complex Systems with Patrick McKenzie, and so many more.